is my baby.
Hi everyone, I am Melissa Bondi.
And I'm Dana Denha, and this is Adventures in Parenthood. Throughout this series, we will explore the world of raising kids from newborn through adulthood.
These kids today are so busy. They start their day early and they head off to school, and once the day is done, they still have more classes, whether it's soccer or gymnastics or dance. And we want our kids to be well-rounded, and that's why we make these hobbies and these classes a priority. Both of which our girls are in now.
Recently, yeah. Keaton just started dance. She's gone to 2 dance classes, but it started about a month ago. And she loves it, but it's still a little, the dance class that we go to, it's no parents are allowed in there. So I noticed when we went this past Tuesday, it was a lot of, wait, don't leave me yet, don't go. But they won't let the parents even walk into the studio.
Right.
So I'm like, we're walking in a line, I'm standing with her in line, and then it's like, bye, and she's like, but then she was fine, and she had a great time, and she talked about how much fun she had dancing, so.
Right, and how can you not have fun dancing? Once you're in it, I feel like.
I know, but personally, me, like, I'm dying to know what's going on in there. Like, it sounds like they're having so much fun, but I just want to see all the cute 3-year-olds and their little tutus and everything, yeah.
Well, fortunately, we do the soccer and the gymnastics thing, and we're able to see it, so I can tell you're missing out for sure.
I know I
don't know you're missing out. I know it's really kind of amazing to see them in their progression of watching her for the last couple of years in both hobbies. But I feel like that's kind of like what we're discussing today is. Right? That's what you do is you put your kids in everything and you see what sticks.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I picked dance more for my own personal reasons because I would have liked to have been in dance classes when I was young, and it wasn't something I had the opportunity to do. So I was like, you know what? I'll kind of push what I would be interested in on her at this point.
Because you can now.
And she can't say. She doesn't know. She can't read. She's not reading like a thing saying, oh, I'll take karate or I'll do this or I'll do that. She doesn't know. So that's kind of how you're picking for Brent too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because I didn't do the sports thing per se when I was young, and I was like, I wish I had that athletic component growing up too, so I didn't. But again, you put them in everything and see what sticks.
It's trial and error for sure.
Exactly, and we're here to make those decisions on their behalf until they get to a point.
Yeah. When they say they're interested in something, they want to try something, and it's trial and error for them too.
Oh yeah.
Once they start making the decisions, I know, like having like older nieces and nephews, I saw them. They'd be like, oh, "Yeah, I'll try softball. I'll try basketball." But then it was like, it's not really what I thought it was going to be. And then they do it for like a year, and then they kind of stop doing it.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think what's gonna might hurt a little bit is when they don't want to do something that you want them to do.
Yeah.
And you have to realize. You can't live through your kids. You gotta let them.
As much as I would like Keaton to dance and like watch how cute that is, if like down the road, I wouldn't be upset if she didn't want to do. She can make all. I would never be upset for her not wanting to do something that I was interested in.
I know you wouldn't.
Yeah.
You're not a stage mom by any means, so I know you wouldn't. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that a parent might have to accept.
Yeah.
Once that time comes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our next guest, well known throughout the area for his martial arts skills, knows firsthand the benefits of discipline and joy that karate can bring. Welcome, Keith Hafner, to the show. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Keith, why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, because you were kind of a kid finding a hobby, too, when it came to martial arts.
Yep.
Yeah.
I began the martial arts in the early 1970s, and it was such a different climate because martial arts were very mysterious and hard to find. Back in those days, and it had all this mystique. But I started just the way any kid would. My buddies were doing it, and I wanted to kick and punch, and so I started. And the months went by, and pretty soon the years went by, and I think all the original people that I had started with fell away, and I'm still plugging away. I earned my black belt when I was in college, and then I came to work at the school very briefly where I had trained after I finished college. And within a few months, my teacher let me know that he wanted to move to Florida. So I bought the school from him at age 22.
Wow, I didn't realize you were that young.
Yeah. And I was this hippie kid who wanted to be a writer. This was the 1970s.
Sure.
No business background. And I found myself with a downtown Main Street Ann Arbor business at age 22.
Wow, that's very ambitious.
It worked. It worked
Yeah.
out.
You know, I think it worked because I didn't know what I was getting into, and so I
Yeah.
didn't know what I didn't
Then you didn't
know.
have the stresses that you would have knowing like what you were actually taking on at 22. I couldn't even imagine at 22 just being like, yeah, I'll buy your business from you.
It was such a different climate back then.
Sure.
I don't know if you've seen the Karate Kid, but in
Yes.
the Karate Kid movie, there's a bad karate school, and that was us. We were a school that taught fighting skills, and it was all about who could fight the best and the toughest, and that's what the martial arts was in those early years. And as a school owner, that was what I continued to teach because that was all that I knew. But there was a point where my sons, Jason and Ian, began training in the program. And there was this seminal moment when I was watching this class, and it was the same kind of class that we always taught, where it was harsh, and this all came out of the military, in the 1960s and 70s. And my younger son, Ian, was in the front row, and he was doing what the teacher said, but he was just sobbing. And I'm at a distance, and I'm watching this, and I just thought, I hate this. I hate our approach. I hate my program because it's so different from how I taught my sons things at home, and the relationship between the two of us, and the climate that I tried to maintain. And so in that moment, I knew I was going to throw the whole thing out the window and start over. And I did. And I began to develop a model where it was more like the way that the martial arts were originally taught, way back, where they were passed down from father to son. And we began to build a friendship-based community.
So you mentioned the Karate Kid, so this is more like the Daniel son part of it.
We moved from the bad school to the good school. But it took a long time because we had all this baggage, all this, and everybody
well, and I'm sure
that we
like
trained
people
with.
expected the harsher method because that's what they were getting all
That's
these
why they
years.
were there.
Yeah.
And so it was a real upheaval. At
So
that point.
what is the method now? How is it different?
What did it evolve to, or what is it?
So the martial arts, the way that they were handed to me, were about the fighting skills, the kicking, the blocking, the punching, the self-defense, competition, those kind of things. And what we knew all along was that the students of the martial arts, in their pursuit of being deadly, were required to develop some discipline and some confidence and some focus and those kind of things. But those qualities were just sort of thrown off almost as a second result of what was actually being pursued. And when I began to redesign this, I thought, what if we made those things the outcome? What if we made those the goal? And we used the self-defense and the kicks and blocks and punches to support the development of those skills, which are really what people and kids in particular need.
Yep.
Now the interesting thing is that that's how martial arts, that's what they were meant to do in the beginning.
And it sort of changed for the worse for a period of time.
You know what happened, Dana, is that the martial arts in the United States were largely brought to the United States by military men who were in Asia
So it made sense
in the
to
50s and 60s. And they trained on military bases, and they loved military ways, and they were taught in a military way, and that's what they brought back with them. And I think everybody kind of just, because that was our country's first exposure to the martial arts, they just assumed that's what it was.
It was, yeah.
But the truth is, historically, martial arts were taught in a climate of friendship and support, and we just really went back to an earlier model.
Can you give us, within the martial arts umbrella, can you tell us what are some of the types of arts there are?
Oh, sure.
What are the?
That maybe ones specifically that you would offer at
Sure.
Or what do you,
Hafner
what do you
Studio.
offer?
Well, technically, Keith Hafner's karate is not a karate school, it's
Yeah.
a Taekwondo school.
Okay.
Okay.
And Taekwondo refers to a specific martial art from South Korea. In the United States, the word karate does refer to a specific martial art from Japan, but it's also used as a generic name for all martial arts. And that's how we use it in our school name.
Okay.
And it's just the recognizable name. Everybody knows what you mean if you say
Yeah.
karate. But you have Kung Fu from China and Judo and Jiu-Jitsu from Japan, different martial arts from the different Asian countries.
So what is Taekwondo then? Like what makes that different from
Yep.
Jiu-Jitsu or
In Taekwondo, Te means foot,
Okay.
Kwan means hand, and Do, that word Do is in the names of a lot of martial arts, refers to the way or the method of studying. So it's kind of the foot-hand method. And the style itself, Taekwondo, is characterized by a lot of kicking techniques, and it is the martial art that has the high, flashy kicks where you see people jumping up in the air and spinning around and flying through the air.
Now, do you do have you done that, or do you do that?
You know, gravity is a bigger factor in my execution of techniques than it was early on.
Okay.
But yes, I did
That's awesome.
grow up being trained in those things.
So I want to ask a little bit about, tell us about the demographic. What men versus women?
Yeah.
age range of kids?
Yeah,
or kids to adults?
I'm interested.
Going back to the beginning, to the early 1970s, there were not kids in the martial arts the way that everybody thinks of now. It was for grown-ups.
Yeah.
And so when I started at age 16, I was the kid back in those days. But with the movie The Karate Kid in the 1980s, that really opened up the kid market. And so a school like ours is probably going to have the majority of their students be kids. We do have a thriving adult program now too.
Sure.
Our adult program is mostly women, but it's really become a kid, or thought of as a kid.
Yeah, and when I
activity.
think of it, I think of children for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned self-defense earlier when we were talking, and like when I think of women doing it, I think of it as more of a self-defense.
Yeah, in fact, if you look at our demographic, our adults are mostly women, and it's a little bit of an older group. It's more like the 35 to 70-year-old group. You might kind of think that it's a bunch of young adults.
20-somethings trying to get a workout or something along those lines.
Yeah. For fitness, right? I mean, obviously, is there any, what about the stretching portion of it? It's got to be great for just overall mental and physical.
Yeah.
I mean, they talk about yoga in that respect. It sounds like something like martial arts would be right up there with it.
I think it's got all the benefits of yoga and things like that, but you know what, Melissa, people like when they come in is that it has this quality of being ballistic. So like to learn to move with speed and power.
Sure,
Or
yeah.
to hit things hard
Okay.
is very cathartic, and I think people kind of find their own inner power when they learn to do those things.
Okay. Can you tell us about the belts and the colors? Like, so what do you start off with? If I come and I'm brand new and I'm going to come and take a class, what would you recommend
White, right?
starting out?
You know, when you come in and do your first classes,
Is there an assessment?
you,
Are you looking at me going,
I don't think it's an assessment. Yeah, you're no good. Get out of here.
You've learned it all already. We can't do anything for you here.
When our students come in, they begin in a karate uniform with no belt,
Okay.
and they take their first couple classes. So if your daughter came in, she would do a couple classes, and at the end of those 2 classes, she would take a little quiz and get promoted to white belt. And that means she's ready to be a student.
Okay.
So our students go through white, yellow, gold, orange, green, purple, blue, red, brown, black.
So it takes a
Okay.
while.
And it takes
Yeah.
4 years to earn a black belt at our
And
school.
is that like a guaranteed 4 years, or you might not get a black
Is this
belt in 4
consist?
years?
You might not,
Yeah,
but
you might not.
eventually you will.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things about it is that it's really based on what a person's capable of individually. It's not like a super objective standard. If you're there and you're pursuing your black belt, we're trying to pull the best out of you. And your best might not be the same as Melissa's best. And neither of you might have the same characteristics as another student. So over a period of 4 years, our teachers are really trained to get to know the students and understand what they're capable of.
Well, I think just reading about it and stuff, this seems like a great alternative to the kid or even the adult that doesn't really feel comfortable with team sports.
Yeah. We get a lot of kids who haven't quite found their place.
Yeah.
And for a lot of them, martial arts comes in and it becomes their thing. In fact, our average stay is about 4 years at the school. So people get into it and the results are really good. And I think a lot of those kids then go back to team sports and feel much more comfortable.
But it
in
helps
that
build their
environment.
confidence doing the
Exactly.
karate thing and knowing their own abilities and their own physical
Exactly.
abilities. Yeah.
Exactly.
Is there, I was just going to ask you regarding that, competition? Is there competition? Or?
There is. Our school isn't a competitive school.
Okay.
A long time ago, we were, but when we started to learn to develop more of the inner qualities that we discussed earlier, we set the competition thing aside and said, you know, you can kind of be a teaching school or a competing school, but you can't do both really well. And so we made the choice just to let the competition part go.
Okay.
How does the actual class sort of work, though? There's an instructor in the front. Are you ever sort of, I don't know, what, battling, you know, fighting other people in class, or are you just sort of doing the moves out like an aerobics class?
Some of both.
Yeah.
A typical class, even with the young kids, is going to be 45 minutes long. And so those students might do a 6 or 7 minute warm-up, and then they would go through 3 10-minute lesson plan based teaching segments. Our classes are team taught, so usually there's 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 teachers on the floor with a group. So they're going to go through, they're going to rotate through the different teachers doing different lesson plan segments. And then they're going to finish up with an interactive message of the week, where each week is going to have a theme that might be teamwork, or being your best, or moving outside of your comfort zone, or getting along with other people. And they're going to finish up with some discussion and question and answer in that subject.
I love that. That's amazing.
I think for a lot of parents, it's their favorite part of the class.
Yeah.
You were talking about dance and not being able to see what your daughter was doing. For us, a big part of what goes on is having the parents present and encouraging them to watch very carefully how their kids do in class, and to be aware of the kinds of things that they're being taught. And not only the kinds of things, but the ways in which they're being taught. So for you to watch your daughter and find out, oh, that teacher really motivated her by doing this.
Yeah.
And
I've never quite seen her in that context before. I think it's, for us, the parents watching is a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more from Keith Hafner. We're back with Keith. Keith, first one, now we've been talking about, you know, all the sort of benefits, but what are like specific? Like, I was looking at the website and I'm like, okay, so you're teaching kids about respect. You're obviously building confidence. Are you seeing these sort of changes in the kids, and from what age?
You know, I think you can take all the kids in a family or a community and kind of, in very rough terms, divide them into 2 categories. You've got kids that usually are well-behaved, nice, and not too confident. And then over here, you're going to have another profile of a kid that's got all the confidence he or she needs, but oftentimes lacks some self-control. And it's not always entirely black and white, but you can kind of look at kids and put them into those 2 categories. And for us, what we're always about is developing the compensating qualities. So if you've got a nice kid who is a little nervous about being moved outside of her comfort zone, we're going to keep her niceness. In fact, we're going to try to continue to cultivate it, but we're going to give her the skills that allow her to move outside of her comfort zone when the situation calls for it. And if you have another kid that's got all the confidence they need, but maybe lacks a little restraint and kind of likes to push the rules a little bit, we're going to work with that kid on developing the self-control that allows him or her to control impulsive behavior and to make good decisions for themselves.
In these classes, in your classes, do you have, what's the age, like?
What's the youngest?
Would you put a 4 with a 6, or what's the range you have? Like,
Yeah, our biggest age group is 4, 5, and 6. We've got quite a few kids that are still 3 and haven't quite had their 4th birthday yet. But a lot of times those kids are training kind of in the 4 to 8-year-old range.
Okay. Okay. I was just wondering, yeah, because I know a lot of these sports and hobbies that we do, they're pretty
They're
specific.
very specific,
You know,
yeah.
you're not putting a 3-year-old
Yeah.
with a 7-year-old.
We've got sometimes too where we mix it all up, where all ages are training together, and I like that too, to give the younger kids the opportunity to train with adults.
Kinda look
And it's
up.
kind of look up to them a little bit,
Look up,
yeah.
yeah.
And like kind of
Kinda
look what
mentor.
they can do, you know,
The
where they
mentor.
can their next step.
It's fun for the adults too.
Yeah. So we were talking about this before the show, but what is the most important technique that you're teaching your students?
Yeah.
You know, in a style like ours, the students are going to learn kicking techniques and blocking techniques and chopping and punching techniques. But if it's okay, I thought I would demonstrate what I think is the most important
Yeah. Yes.
technique in the martial arts. Now watch closely so you don't miss it. But it's here. Now in Asian culture, the bow is the way that you show respect. It's a way of acknowledging the value of another person. And when a kid or a grown-up comes to karate, that's the very first thing they learn. It's the bow. And throughout somebody's long martial art history, like myself, that bow remains at the center.
And I noticed you had your arms to your sides. Is that always, everyone does that sort of a uniform bow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's an emphasis on precise movements and everything.
Is
that
that
we do.
in the beginning and the end of each class?
Yeah, and when students approach each other and,
Oh.
and at other times during the class. But I'll give you an example of the dynamic of what we do. In the beginning, the teacher's going to have the kids bow, and they're going to do a clumsy little bow, and they're not going to know what that means. They're just going to do it. But as time unfolds, the teacher is going to gradually explain to a class that this is how we show respect in the martial arts. So classes are unfolding and students are bowing. And then something really interesting happens. And that's that after a while, those students that are bowing will begin to feel respectful when they do that movement. And now with that class, instead of telling them, hey, you guys need to show respect, now we've developed an actual skill, an actual feeling in
Sure.
them. And once they've experienced that, it's easy to teach them the lessons of self-respect and respect for others, because viscerally they've got it. Kinesthetically, they've experienced that bow and the attendant feelings. And I think everything in our program, whether it's respect or learning that you're a powerful person or learning to step outside of your comfort zone, is all tied to the feelings that are generated by doing not just the bow, but also all the different moves of the martial arts.
Oh, very neat. We're going to ask him, so
Yeah, so you wrote a
You're-
book,
yeah, you're an author
How
and
to
a martial
Build
arts.
Rock Solid Kids, because you've been around kids. I mean, this has been, what, like 4 decades or something like that?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about how this book kind of came to be and what can people expect to read in this book?
Sure. So I wrote Rock Solid Kids about 20 years ago. I think it's in its 4th printing right now. And we had just worked with, at that point, about 20,000 kids and had learned a lot. And we wanted to share that information with people who were never probably going to have their kids in a martial art program. And the strategy or the thought behind it is that throughout history, parents had a pretty good idea of how to raise their kids properly. Your grandmother, your great-grandmother wasn't confused about parenting
Yeah.
issues. But over the last 50 years or so,
Right.
all kinds of ideas have come in that really have, I think, in particular, young parents confused about the best way to raise their kids. And so what Rock Solid Kids does is it goes back to that earlier wisdom that your grandmother and your great-grandmother had, where parents were really comfortable being in charge and making solid decisions for their kids and having clear boundaries
Right.
and actually building skills. And so Rock Solid Kids is nothing new. It goes back to the earlier wisdom.
Well, and I think like you talk about how like things are so different today. We have more knowledge because of the internet and everything. But it also is like, I feel like when you have a kid, it's like too many cooks. Like
Yeah.
everyone's got an opinion about the way you need to raise your kids, and that's where you do question yourself.
Yep.
And you lose your confidence
Yep.
in parenting. Yeah.
I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah. How do you feel like you know, being in karate and things of that nature helps build a sense of community.
Yeah. I hope sometime you stop down at Keith Hafner's Karate, and I think you'd feel that when you come through the door, because if you're a parent and you bring your kid there, you've brought her because you value the kinds of things that we've shown you.
Right.
And the interesting thing is that that's why everybody else is there too, because they value those things. So I think it's just a wonderful community. It's a wonderful family to be part of, because it's a group of people that are proactive in really putting their kids first and wanting the very best for their kids.
Right. And yeah, that's exactly what we've been talking about. This is the show in general is about, you know, just the betterment for our kids and taking these topics and bringing them to light and just talking about them in just a slightly different way. I think that's kind of, you know, our theme, our goal of the show. And no, I say I'm pretty enlightened by just martial arts in general with kids.
And before we go, I would like to know, you know, we were talking before we introduced you about like hobbies, picking hobbies for your kids. And when they're young, you're obviously choosing your own likes. But maybe like someone like me wasn't thinking about karate. Why choose karate when it's sort of not on your radar?
One of the things that we've really done well with in our program is this idea that our program and our particular approach is not for kids that are interested in karate. It's not for kids that like karate. It's for parents who want their kids to be exposed to certain kinds of skills. And so unlike soccer and tennis and volleyball and other things that are pretty much for recreation that your kids might be in, I think our program is really for parents who see this as a central part of their kids' education. And they often, I think, are making an executive decision about these kinds of activities. The same way you wouldn't let your daughter come home and say, I'm not going back to second grade.
Yeah.
That karate, they put that in that same kind of category as things that are important rather than fun.
Yeah, and I'm sure, like you talk about building confidence and stuff, I'm sure that helps in school. Like when you have to go do public speaking in school, and that's like the most nerve-wracking thing when you're young. And I'm sure, like, yeah, doing karate and stuff just helps you feel more comfortable in those sort of situations as well. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Keith.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
If you have an idea for a parenting show topic or guest, talk to us on Twitter and Facebook at #CTN Ann Arbor.
Or for more programming and services here at CTN, you can visit us at a2gov.org/CTN or visit youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor to watch our full lineup. And remember, like, comment, and share this program and our others. And thanks for joining us here on this adventure in parenthood.